In this episode, we will tell you the story of the penile implant. The story began in 1936. A Russian surgeon named Nikolai Bogoraz decided to implant a material inside the penile tissue to restore its rigidity. The material he thought to implant was rib cartilage. He took a rib cartilage from the patient and implanted it inside the penile tissue. However, rib cartilage was not the best material to implant inside penile tissue. It resulted in bacterial infection, and the cartilage was absorbed after a short time, leading to fibrosis in the penile tissue. Therefore, this was not a very successful choice. However, this was the beginning of the first idea of someone implanting something inside penile tissue. In 1950, an American surgeon named Scardino was the first to consider implanting a manufactured material inside the penile tissue. However, the research of this surgeon was not published. In 1952, two doctors named Goodwin and Scott decided to implant acrylic material inside the penile tissue. This was because acrylic material is not absorbed by the body, it is easy to shape, and it is flexible. The problem is that these doctors implanted the acrylic material outside the corpus cavernosum, not inside the corpus cavernosum as we do now. They implanted it under a tissue of penile tissue called buccal fascia. As a result, the acrylic rods that they implanted would pierce the skin and come out, or pierce the urethra and come out. From here, the operation stopped for a period of time, and they thought that it had failed or that it was not a successful operation. This continued until 1960, when two other doctors came up with the idea of how to implant this acrylic material inside the corpus cavernosum. From here, the operation began to develop and succeed, especially when they began to implant acrylic material inside the corpus cavernosum. In 1966, an Egyptian plastic surgeon named Dr. Gamal el-Beheri was the first to consider implanting rods made of polyethylene material inside the corpus cavernosum. However, the fact is that because he was a plastic surgeon, he published his research in scientific journals specialized in his field of surgery. This made urologists at the time ignore his research. In 1967, a surgeon named Berman decided to implant a single rod inside the penis, but only under the buccal fascia. However, of course, this method did not work. The rod pierced the skin and came out. He decided to implant two rods inside the corpus cavernosum in the same way as Dr. Gamal el-Beheri, a plastic surgeon from Egypt. From here, the development of the flexible implant began in the concept that we have known and seen today, and which is still in continuous development from the first time they implanted it inside the walls of the corpus cavernosum. In 1973, a very important turning point occurred in the history of implants. The first hydraulic implant, or the first inflatable implant, appeared. The idea was that, unlike the flexible implant, which achieves permanent rigidity, the hydraulic implant would achieve rigidity only when needed. It is composed of three parts: two tubes placed inside the corpus cavernosum, a pump placed in the scrotum next to the testicle, and a reservoir or tank placed in the pelvic region inside the patient's abdomen. The patient, when he wants to have sex and wants to make the penis erect, starts to press the pump in the scrotum. The fluid starts to move from the reservoir in the abdomen to the tubes in the penis, and the penis starts to swell and achieve rigidity. When he finishes the marital relationship, he presses a certain button on the pump, and the fluid returns to the reservoir and the penis relaxes. In 1994, a second type of hydraulic implant appeared. It is the hydraulic implant with two pieces. It is like the hydraulic implant with three pieces, but the difference is that it does not have a reservoir. The part that is placed in the abdomen was replaced with two small reservoirs located in the tubes that are implanted inside the corpus cavernosum. So it became only two pieces, the tubes that are placed inside the two cavernous bodies and a pump located in the scrotum. The pump in the scrotum is easier to use and easier to install. In 2001, a major development occurred in the world of implants, especially hydraulic implants, when AMS company decided to coat its implant with a layer of antibiotics called Hibiclens, with the aim of reducing the incidence of infection after surgery. In fact, this layer has contributed to a significant reduction in the incidence of infection after implanting the implant. This is what encouraged Coloplast Company in 2002 to coat its implant with a hydrophilic coat layer. This layer absorbs the antibiotics used during the operation and continues to release them in the patient's body after the operation for a while, also with the aim of reducing the incidence of infection. The truth is that this layer, whether Hibiclens or hydrophilic coat by Coloplast, has really contributed to a significant reduction in the incidence of infection. It also contributed to the success of the operation and contributed to the fact that we, as surgeons, have been installing implants with confidence. The patient is also reassured when he installs the implant, especially if he is a diabetic patient or a patient with low immunity, so the possibility of infection after implanting the implant is very small. In 2018, a major development occurred when scientists thought about how to make an implant that can be controlled remotely through a mobile application. Here, the pump in the scrotum is replaced with a remote control device, and in fact, this implant was implemented and will be available in the US market in 2025. In this implant, it is controlled remotely, and it is controlled by a device that controls the amount of fluid that is pumped into the penis and the amount of stiffness of the tubes inside the penis. One of the important advantages of the implant operation is that it is an adjustable operation which may not be available in many other operations, in the sense that the patient who has the appendix surgery cannot come one day and say, hey, give me the appendix back, and the one who removed the gallbladder cannot go back on his word. But the implant operation, if the patient installs the implant, he can easily replace it after a number of years if a newer type of implant appears. I say this so that one does not say, oh, there is continuous development in the world of implants, so I will wait until they release something newer. No, my friend, take advantage of the technology that is available at the present time in your time. Enjoy your time, live a happy married life. If a newer type of implant appears and you want to replace the implant, it is a very easy thing to do. We as doctors can easily replace this type with that type. Many patients come to replace the flexible implant with a hydraulic implant, or vice versa. A hydraulic implant is replaced with a flexible implant. Or if a new development of implants is released, he comes and says, remove the first type for me and install the second one. This is a very easy thing to do. This is one of the advantages of the implant operation. The implant operation will remain one of the radical solutions to the problem of erectile dysfunction and sexual impotence. It has solved the problems of many people. It achieves stiffness for the penis. It achieves marital pleasure. The patient, after the operation, feels like a normal person who is able to complete the marital relationship. The feeling is natural. The pleasure is natural. The ejaculation is natural. It is not a mechanical process as people think. The implant does not create an erection, but rather supports a natural erection. The implant does not create an artificial erection. The erection provided by the implant is a natural erection. It is not an artificial or synthetic erection. The implant does not create an erection in principle. The implant does not solve the problem of erectile dysfunction. Rather, it treats the symptoms. The implant only achieves the lost stiffness. The implant supports the natural erection, allowing the penis to reach the lost stiffness. The implant does not create an erection in the first place. The implant only achieves the lost stiffness. However, the patient retains his natural erection. The wife doesn't feel any difference. That's what makes many husbands undergo bypass surgery without telling their wives, and maybe his wife doesn't feel any difference. Stay tuned for a new episode of the Men's World program. Stay healthy and safe.